in 2018, there was a conference that started, and they were really touting being like the beginning of something new. We're gonna, this is the new way that we're gonna do it. And there was a lot of money and effort and time. You could tell that like so much thought went into it, and yet they became somewhat notorious for having all male panels. And so even on topics that were centered around women's health. And so on an organizational side, women don't have any issue getting jobs in an entry level or even middle management position. In fact, they make up more than 80% of the workforce in the healthcare and health IT industry, but they are less than 20% of leadership positions.
So I would be the one who was tasked with telling a family or moms that they weren't going to be covered when their child had a chronic condition or something that was going to cause them to either have to give up their job and stay home and take care of their child or institutionalize their child. So when I would have those conversations, I would always in the back of my mind say, why is this happening? And it has this great impact on the way women can work. So I just took it upon myself. I'm like, I'm going to do something about this. And I got tired of having those conversations. It's almost, I would have anything from women who would have to travel 3 counties over to drop their child off at a facility, or the other option would be to stop working. So I'm like, this needs to change. And I kind of started working on that from that angle of women need to be able to thrive, their children need to be able to thrive, and we need to do something a little bit different. When people feel like their voices are not being heard in a space, this is where you see these disparities show up. So we know from research that women of color, when they see their doctors, they're less likely to be believed when they report a problem. Why is that? We also know that in medical school, doctors are still being taught, when we train them, they're still being taught that women of color don't experience pain to the same levels. Why is that? So those are the questions that we need to be asking and the problems that we need to be solving, because it has such an impact on the maternal health rate and the disparity rate in this country, because we are the United States and we should not have this particular problem at this point.
There are times when technology is implemented or evaluated for technology's sake because it's really cool. And I think that as an industry, we need to remember that there are patients, there are users, there are other stakeholders involved. We think about the care circle, or thinking in terms about the care circle for a patient. That includes family members, friends, as well as the clinicians and staff. So I think we need to do a better job in connecting with those people to understand what works. If I see another separate dashboard for a single solution, it happens all the time, which is great, and they're really interesting. But how is a clinician going to look at this dashboard for this, that dashboard for that? We need to think in terms of this ecosystem and really helping not only the patients, but the practitioners get away from alarm fatigue, help them with, the massive burden that they're under today, and really think in terms of the users as well as the other stakeholders. So not implementing technology for technology's sake, making sure that the compliance component is built in, the security component is built in, and then working with a group of advisors to make sure that what you're putting together is not only compliant, but is usable in the context of that person's everyday work life.
We have this kind of cognitive bottleneck in learning, where if you're learning something on a paper, a traditional format, your brain is only able to absorb so much of the information, and so it happens slowly. In virtual reality, because you're immersed in the environment, it's able to unlock all 4 of the brain's learning systems. So the cognitive system, like we talked about, the experiential system, because you're immersed in it, the behavioral system, because it feels motivating to you, and the sensory system. So you're actually feeling and experiencing what it is to be there in that environment. So it really does unlock a key to more advanced learning. Things we kind of stumbled upon during this process is, I was telling patients that, okay, I'm using this VR technology, which allows me to simulate the surgery beforehand. And in some cases, it allows me to change the surgical plan beforehand. So after doing the VR, have been several cases where I realized that, my original plan wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to get the kind of line of sight that I needed to get to the tumor. And so the VR simulation allowed me to change the plan prior to surgery and ended up performing the right plan on the patient.
Number one, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. As Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve the problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem. So, take that advice. Number two, really focus on, the business of your solution, how you're going to be operationalizing it. Don't shortchange that. And number three, always know that what's the action, what's the outcome you're building toward. That will crystallize everything else and will make it, easy. And the last thing, I guess, the bonus one, don't build where you don't have to build.
Patients like to be seen by their providers. Actually, even when we went and sheltered in place and we switched to this, remote visits and video visits, the minute they could, they were back in the office wanting to, and they treated it like it was, Christmas Day or something like that. They get dressed up. They really want to see and have that interaction. And I think that goes back to, this human-led engagement is going to be really important. But what was fascinating and really helpful is when the pandemic started and we had a lot of patients who did have chronic disease, we were able to reach them even though they weren't able to come in, and actually still, through this multidisciplinary team-based approach, affect outcomes and continue to keep their health at the forefront of their priority list and our priority. And I think that will be in the prevention space as well. And how do we complement a patient's visit using digital health devices, remote patient monitoring? How can that support their short-term and long-term goals? Supporting the provider in that journey is going to be really important to enable accessibility and adoption globally.
The other big driver, I think, that post-COVID or during COVID is companies. For years, companies have talked about the health of their workforce, not really done anything about it. COVID has shown companies how vulnerable the company is to damage to the health of their workforce. So in our conversations with companies, we see an increasing recognition that they need to look after not just COVID at the workplace, but also their diabetes, their blood pressure, heart and lung disease. And I think we need to build on that to demonstrate that personal care records will lead to a fitter, healthier, and therefore a more productive workforce. I think the day of the personal care record is finally here. I think it needs to be citizen-owned and citizen-held, and so it needs to be citizen-driven. So get out there and start asking for your own. And we look forward enormously to playing our part in helping the citizens of the world to have their own lifelong personal care records. Thank you so much, Rena. Thank you, Fran.